So if you're an avid listener of the podcast, you've heard Jade interject with some of her own personal experiences, enough to know that she's been through some real shit in her life, and she's used it to shape who she is today. So I'd love it, Jade, if you could take me and the listeners on a little journey with you through some of the windy roads that led you here. And of course, as you tell your story, I might detour you to dive deeper into one thing or another, but let's start at the beginning and see what comes up.
Yeah, so I was born in 1984
on a dark and stormy night.
It all started on Bourbon Street. Yeah, my story, I've been trying to figure out how to share my story in a way that doesn't hurt the people that may have seemed like the bad characters, because no one is bad, and I don't want to make anyone feel guilty or pay for something that happened 3 decades ago. So I've been recently trying to figure out how to share my truth in a way that helps others without shaming those characters.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
But I think that maybe if I start out my story by saying that, you know, all of these people who hurt me were hurting, and that they are already forgiven, and that they are not all, but most of them are completely different people now that would never inflict this pain on another now. But yeah, my story starts out very dark. My birth dad was a drug addict and abused my mom. I feel like every time he was around, it's at least all of my memories. I have very few memories where he took me outside and we played, or where he got home from work and I was excited to see him. But that just goes to show that a child that is being traumatized still lives in the now. And just because they're happy to see their parents doesn't mean that they're not being abused. He almost killed my mom multiple times in front of me. I remember being in the bathtub and him trying to drown her in the toilet while I was right there in the tub. And he was telling me to tell her goodbye. And I was begging him not to. And then I remember another time that we were hiding from him, and I was crying because I was scared, because I knew he was trying to bang our door down. And my mom, since we were hiding, put a pillow over my face to try to keep me quiet. And so not only was I trying to hide from this man that I was terrified from, but I also couldn't breathe because I was being suffocated basically by this pillow. And all she was trying to do was more keep us safe. But when he finally got the door down, we were hiding, and he pulled her out from her hair and then down the stairs, and he was spitting on her. And I remember just sitting there and watching and having no emotional reaction at all. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel sadness. And I was only about 3 years old. And that's the first time that I remember disassociating from my surroundings. And after that, I remember that happening a lot. When he one time was chasing my mom, I jumped off of a 3rd-story patio, and I remember disassociating. I remember not feeling fear or sadness and just wanting to get away from him.
What happened there when you jumped off this patio? What drove you to do that in the first place? What was the idea there?
That I could fly away from him, I think, because I was obsessed with a movie about a boy that could fly. He was like my imaginary friend. And I think I just wanted to fly away from my life like that boy did, because that's kind of what he does in the movie. But that was around 4. My birth dad starts going to jail at 5, which is when my sister's born. And I remember him beating my mom when she was pregnant with my sister so bad that my mom started crawling like a child and reverted back to her toddler years and was crying for her mom as if she was a toddler. And I remember seeing that. And I think about now how when we're in our mother's womb, that's like our first idea of the world. And so our mother is like the window to the world for us when we're in the womb. And how when I was in my mom's stomach, that she wasn't really around my dad, she wasn't really dating him. But when she was pregnant with my sister, he was around and he was very abusive, and it was a very traumatic time. And I think about how me and my sister dealt with things so differently, and how sometimes you think like, well, these two people grew up in the same home and they went down such different paths. Sometimes I think it goes back even to like what happened in the womb, you know, and how different emotions were carried at that time. He started going to jail when I was 5, and that's around the time that my mom started to become abusive. And it was a really unstable upbringing from then on out. I went to 18 different schools and never really felt like I was belonging anywhere. And when I was 9, my birth dad got out of jail. And I remember him taking me and my sister to Toys R Us and saying that he had this like chip that said he had been sober for all this time, and that he wasn't going to smoke cigarettes anymore. I'm super allergic. He wasn't going to smoke cigarettes anymore, and that he had changed, and he was going to be our dad, and took us to Toys R Us, got us toys. And then we went to like this buffet, like Shoney's or something. And he had disappeared for like, it had been a while. And so I got up, I was like 9 years old. I got up and like started looking around for him and found him in the smoking section, smoking a cigarette. And I remember just feeling like really betrayed. And then that was the last time I saw him for years. Then he went back to jail. So the next time I saw him, I'm 12. And at this time I'd already been molested by 2 different older cousins. And my mom is really physically and verbally abusive. And I'm just really confused on my identity as a whole, because I don't feel worthy at home. I'm confused about what happened sexually. I've talked about before that when that was first came out, that the first person who found out said, I bet you liked it. I bet you liked his fingers in you. And so there was this instant from then on out, I didn't feel, even into my 20s, like I was allowed to feel pleasure. And then once I did allow myself to feel pleasure, if the man felt it and I didn't, I felt used for my body. So that went in that direction. But there was so much confusion on who I was at 12 years old and whether or not I was lovable, whether or not I was worthy. I was already suicidal. I'd already tried to kill myself at least a dozen times. And there was a time that my mom got really, really violent in very scary ways. And there were times that I just felt safer outside in the middle of the night than I did at home. And so when my birth dad got out at 12, and this time he really did seem changed, and I had told him what was going on, he said that he was going to figure out me living with him and that he was going to do it right this time, basically. And I think I saw him for like 2 weekends, and I don't know if ironically is the right word, but we went to go see Con Air, which is like a Nicolas Cage movie where he gets out of jail and reunites with his daughter. And we both cried, and it was a bonding experience. And now that movie makes me gag, but the thought of that movie makes me gag. And maybe that's why I don't like Nicolas Cage, but I think I saw him 2 weekends. And then I remember packing more stuff, like hoping that I would go stay with him, even though he still gave me this unsafe feeling and this feeling of instability. I at least thought that he wasn't going to hit me, I think. And I would be away from those cousins. And
now, had he been physically abusive to you up to this point, or just to your mother?
Just to my mother, but to the point where I thought it was always going to be me next because of the look in his eyes when he would look at me while doing it to her.
Yeah.
And when he got out of when I had more stuff packed and I had thought that was going to be my next chapter, it was right before turning 13. I remember being in my room with more stuff packed and my mom coming in and just saying, he's back in jail. And I remember just thinking, like, that's it. I'm never, ever, ever trusting anyone again. I am never going to let someone make me feel like they can rescue me. And it was that first feeling of like, I will never need another person. Like, I am going to figure this out on my own. And I definitely am never going to need a man or a dad. I already disliked women. I had decided, but that was the first time that I really was vulnerable towards a man. And I remember feeling like I will never let him in again. And that was when I stopped trusting, because I was already like having little boyfriends at school. That was when I stopped trusting them. That was when I stopped trusting friends. That was when I kind of even started lying about who I was at new schools, because I felt like it didn't matter, like truth didn't matter and words didn't hold any value. And then by 14, I started dating a 22-year-old guy, left home, hitchhiked a few hours away, greyhounded it from there, and dropped out of school. I started miraculously, I hadn't lost my virginity yet, and I wasn't doing drugs, but I was dating much older men, and I was working as a waitress from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., homeschooling myself in the late afternoon, and then throwing newspapers from about 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. at 14, 15 years old. And right at my 16th birthday, I said, this is the most emptiest life I could have imagined. I don't have anyone that I feel really loves me, and I don't love anybody. And I was even thinking about ways I could get pregnant, because I just wanted to have some sense of family and have someone that I could love. And
the baby, meaning the baby,
like start my own family and somehow start this love relationship and really love that child, and that child be my family, because I didn't feel like I had anybody. And that was right at 16. And I had already been rushed to the ER a couple times that year from trying to kill myself. And it was actually my 16th birthday this night that I'm recalling, but I was just crying and thinking, like, I live for nothing. There's no point. And I'm ending up, because neither of my parents graduated high school, I thought I'm just ending up like my parents. And
is that the same strife you were having through, like, since you were 12 and starting to have suicidal thoughts and attempts? Was it the same, just no one's going to love me, or what was the actual, like,
I think because I always say that depression is a lack of hope in the future. And I think I just had zero hope for anything to change
or
ever.
anything to get better. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nothing ever got better. And I think it was also the only thing I knew because my mom was very suicidal, and I would hear her talk like that. And I started trying to commit suicide at 10 years old. I feel like most 10-year-olds don't know how or what that is. But I remember putting a bag over my head and trying to kill myself at 10, and my mom's boyfriend laughing at me and telling me that like the correct way to do it. And that made me even more feel like a
alone.
fool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a fool. Like I couldn't even do that right. And I was definitely finding my identity in boys liking me, but I wasn't giving myself to the boys. I wasn't losing my virginity. I wasn't saying I love you, but I was finding my validation through them loving me.
Through sexuality to some regard.
I was very developed already. I had size D breast in middle school. But that night, my 16th birthday, I remember crying, and I had already kind of believed in God, but been confused because we would go to church and then we would get beaten, and we would go to church, but then my birthday I would go to church and say God changed him, but then he would go right back to drugs. So I was really confused about what security God gave, but I knew that in the scary times, and my birth dad had kidnapped me once, and I remember singing in the car in the back seat when he kidnapped me. I remember singing Jesus Loves Me, and feeling like, just from that song, feeling like, okay, it's going to be okay. Like Jesus is going to protect me, something about that. And so when I was 16 and I was feeling all this depression and lack of hope and wanting to kill myself again, I just cried out to whatever I thought that being was. And that supreme being, that thing that was bigger than me, that was able to protect me. And I just said, if you'll just take this depression from me, I promise you that I will do good with my life. I promise you that I will help other people that feel this way. And I had been crying for hours, and I was in the backseat of a car. Had bought a car, and I would sleep in the back sometimes. And so I was in the backseat of the car just crying. And I remember feeling like a vacuum just sucked everything out of me, not to where I felt empty, but to where I for once had silence. Like I for once didn't have all of this ickiness and all of these other voices in my head telling me I wasn't enough or that I wasn't loved, just nothing there in a peaceful way. And that was enough to make me believe in a higher power, because it was such a strong feeling. And so that next day I took a Greyhound bus back to San Antonio, because that was the only youth group that I really had ever felt was authentic. And so I took a Greyhound bus back to San Antonio and started going to a youth group there. I was sleeping at a restaurant in the smoking section. I would order like a little cup of soup so that I could stay there. I enrolled in the Youth Homeless Association, and they helped me finish school. They enrolled me in night school, summer school, paid for my bus passes and my school supplies and my free lunches. It got me free lunches. And then I would go to this little cafe called Jim's, and I would sit in the smoking section and I would read and do my homework, and then I would kind of like crash there. And the waiters knew me, and I worked at Chuck E. Cheese, and I was going to the Bible study at that school, and the youth pastors of that youth group that I had taken a Greyhound bus down just to be a part of, walked into Chuck E. Cheese one time while I was working, and I was like, hey, there's this Bible study at school that I'm a part of, and we would love to have you guys speak. And he was like, okay, cool, just give me your phone number. And I didn't have a phone number to give him because I was homeless, but I didn't want to tell him that. No one knew that I was homeless. I had 2 outfits that I would alternate at school, and I would get made fun of for that, but I don't think people actually knew I was homeless. I think they just thought that I was dirty and poor. And I was also living off of tortilla soup, so I was kind of overweight. So I got made fun of a lot for that too. But the youth pastor, I didn't want to tell him I was homeless, and so I just said, oh, I don't have a phone, but if you can just show up Thursday at 8:15, we'll have you speak. And that was all I said, that could have made him know that I was in a not so good situation, but who knows by looking at me. And that next week he showed up and he said, hey, God told me to take you home with us, that you're going to live with us. And the restaurant's name was Jim's. And I was like, oh, no, I live with my friend Jim, and I help out a lot there. So I can't do that, because I was just untrusting.
Right.
And it also just sounded weird, like God told you. And so I had said no. And he was like, listen, I heard from God that you're supposed to live with us. And I had a vision that it happened. So you're going home with us tonight. And so I did. I went home with them, and I slept in a bed for the first time in so long. And
at this point, where are your parents? Your dad's in jail. Your mom is
my birth dad's in
non-responsive.
jail. My mom had probably just given up on any anything
reaching out
good.
to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that she knew a lot of damage had been done. I think that she wanted me to live at home, but she also had so many demons she was facing herself, and she didn't know what to do with me.
She knew it might be better for you outside of home.
Yeah, I honestly believe she loved me, but I think that she knew that a lot of damage had been done and that we both needed a lot of help. And it was just a really sad situation. And
so you move in with this pastor, and tell me what happens there.
Yeah, so it's him and his wife, and
this isn't like a foster situation. Are you over 18 at this point?
No, I'm still 16.
You're 16. Okay. So, but no one's out looking for you or anything like that. Okay.
No, I pretty much took my own, I got a hardship license and enrolled in the Youth Homeless Association. So it's pretty much my own guardian.
Got it. Okay.
That way I could enroll myself in night school and summer school and all that. And I never called them mom and dad. And I remember it took me almost 2 years to say I love you to them.
To the pastor and his wife.
And I remember talking to my best friend, Marcus McFly. Marcus was like the star football player that for some reason took me under his wing in this high school. And he was like the coolest guy. And I was the least cool girl. But him always looking out for me made people stop picking on me.
Yeah. Sounds like, what's the movie? You know the movie.
She's All That, or Walk to River. Yeah. Except it wasn't a bet. And he's still in my life.
Amazing.
And then I his best friend was the like star quarterback, and he took me to homecoming, and it really was seemed like a prank, but
like a movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're with this couple, and you're being essentially raised now by two people who are loving.
Yeah, they prayed with me every night. They asked to see my report cards. They asked how my school was. They also lived on an Air Force base and had to drive like 45 minutes just to take me to school because they knew I'd gone to 18 schools. They didn't want to pull me out of another school. I was a sophomore or junior, and they didn't want to do that to me again. So they would drive 45 whole minutes just to keep me in the same school. And I know that they meant really, really well. And I know that they loved me. And I know that they thought they were doing what was best for me and what God asked them to do. But they were so dogmatic in their religion that I went from the extreme of not having any rules, being able to do whatever I wanted at whatever hour, to this, I wasn't even allowed to watch Friends. I wasn't allowed to have a crush on a boy. Like I wasn't allowed to almost even have my own thoughts.
What religion were they practicing?
So they would say Christian, but it was something called the Government of 12, where there's a Wikipedia if you want to look it up, but you basically are Christ, one of his 12 disciples. You go out and make 12 disciples. They go out and make 12 disciples, and then they go out and make 12 disciples. And that's how you lead the world to the government
of Christianity to some degree.
Exactly. And that's how you build your church and the kingdom of God.
Okay. So it's this,
I'm their 12.
I don't like using the word
disciple
cult because I think it's all cults, but everything we do is cults. Our magic mobbers are our cult. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But so we would say that this is a cult.
It felt like a cult.
Government of 12.
It felt like a cult, but I really think they were coming from love. But I was I was one of their 12 disciples. And it was very, very much, everything was around me finding more of the 12. And I really wasn't allowed to think for myself. I had become just who they wanted me to be. But at the same time, they had literally taken me off the streets.
Right.
And so anything that they told me, I was like, they want what's best for me. They have my best interest at heart. They gave me my first own room, Yeah.
And, well, you were trying to parent yourself as a young child for all these years. And then somebody comes in and tries to give you structure. And you're like, this is what I've been wanting. So I'm going to try it.
Exactly. It was all that I wanted. Even though I didn't feel like they were a mom and dad, they were the first loving couple. And
that you'd witnessed, that first type of connected two people.
But they were really freaking hard on me. And it almost diminished my self-esteem as much as everything else because I didn't feel good enough there either. And that came with my own projections, but I was never good enough for God's love. And I was never good enough for their love because everything was fear-based and shame-based in this religion. And we were terrified of hell. We were terrified of going to hell. And we were terrified of missing the mark, of what we were supposed to hit based off the Bible. And
it was a punishment.
I was always in trouble because there were so many rules. And even though, when I was 17, there was this man that was a golden hearted man and did nothing wrong by me, but I didn't choose him. They said, we've prayed about it and we feel this is the man God has for you. I had previous crushes before on men, and they had said, that's not your husband, so you're not allowed to date them. which whatever, but when they said this about this man, I was around 17 and a half, almost 18. And they were like, we're going to pray about this for about 7 months. And then we'll go on your first date. Literally, we'll go on your first date.
Oh my goodness.
And so right about when I turned 19, me and him and the 2 youth pastors went on a date and basically said, you can hold hands in a month, you can see each other once a week in public settings, and you can kiss at your wedding altar in ideally a year and a half, basically. And so
you had an arranged marriage situation happening.
So people in this group still don't think that's arranged. And I think it's because I could have said no. They wouldn't have liked it, but I was not forced into this. They said this is what God wanted, or this is what they felt God showed them. And so to me, no doubt about it, like, I want what God wants. I want what these people want. And this man, holy hell, he'll never yell at me. He'll never cuss at me. Like, he was a moralized man. And this was like something I had never thought I'd be able to have based off of all the men I had seen. And I remember, because he was already in college, and I remember this girl telling me, your boyfriend's so cute. As soon as he got in my car to work on my project, he said, I just want to tell you that I am a committed man. And so it was like, when she told me that, I was like, I've struck gold.
Yeah, he was not out to hurt you in any way, but he's part of this, what is it, government of 12 as well.
And a hardcore Puerto Rican. So his family's never had a divorce. Like, they're very loyal. And he really did treat me really good. I remember in the beginning, he tried really hard. I had like 12 bouquets in my room at all times. He was like, tried really hard to be sweet and romantic, but our foundation was the fact that, like, it was what we were told God wanted. Yeah. And all of our dates revolved around, like, studying the Bible and like we would go to the mall and try to convince people to pray with us. That's what we would do on our dates. And so it's like, we were really good at the Bible stuff.
What was the sex like? Can I just ask?
No, we didn't have sex. And so, so until marriage, right? So that's the thing.
Right.
So by the time I married this man.
Yes. So now you do marry this man.
So I married, about a year and a half later, we get married.
You're 18, 19?
Just shy of 21.
Okay.
A year and a half later, we get married, and we had purged ourselves of all sexual desires and all fantasies, because we didn't want to slip. We didn't want to mess up.
And burn an eternal flame of hell.
No. And also it was like, our whole foundation was that we were a mighty team for God. And like, we just didn't want to be separated by the devil, because we were on a mission to, further the kingdom of God.
Right.
And which sounded really beautiful at the time, but we, had we not been placed together, we may have built a solid foundation and had a connection, but we didn't build a foundation of connection. Right. And we also had never been alone before. And so on our wedding night, it felt really passionless and loveless, and there was no connection. And I just thought, fuck, this is what I've been waiting for. Like, this is what we're supposed to wait.
Still not had sex up to this point?
Not besides assault, which I feel doesn't count, which I felt didn't count.
You didn't have any positive sexual experiences?
I didn't have sex on my choosing up until this point. So in my eyes, I felt like a virgin, because that had been robbed from me. So we go on our honeymoon. It's 11 days. We don't really have sex. I think maybe like 2 times. And I remember being on my honeymoon and seeing an Asian little girl with a white couple, and saying, because I had always wanted to adopt. And at this point I was like, I didn't want any of my own kids. I wanted to adopt all these kids, because I knew what it was like to be unwanted. And this was a huge goal of mine. And on our honeymoon, I said, oh man, I can't wait till we can adopt one day. And he was like, we're not adopting. And that was when it hit me, like, oh my God, this man doesn't even know the deepest desires of my heart, my heart. He just knows what I want to do at church, basically. Right. And so it hit me then. But yeah, in that first year of marriage, I wouldn't say we even had sex once a month. And I remember putting on lingerie and trying to do a little dance, and him saying that he had homework and to stop. And all those years of feeling unworthy. And then the first time that I'm like giving myself to a man and like putting on a presentation, and him turning me down.
Almost shaming you for it in a sense, because of
it made me feel cheap. Yeah. And I kept trying and trying and trying. And I remember a year and a half into marriage saying, because we never went on dates. He never did anything romantic. We didn't have text messages back then. This is 15 years ago. So we didn't have text messages. So it's not like today where I can still talk to him if he's busy. We would go days without speaking at all. And we didn't celebrate Valentine's Day. I mean, we were just roommates who were just trying to get through college. There was the other thing, the church they told me I couldn't go to college because it would take away from the time of building the kingdom of God, because I was a woman and I needed to let the man do that. Well, then when I married him, he became my authority instead of them. And he really wanted me to go to college. So college became my life.
Okay.
And so we were just so focused on college, nothing else. And I remember a year and a half in saying, so I started college. So this is where the bubble pops, right? Because then I'm meeting other girls that like,
they're telling you their lives. Yeah.
Yeah. And like what type of sex they're having. And like, I'm trying to get them to go to church and they're telling me why they don't want to go. And like, it's just opening up my mind to all these other perspectives. And I just thought, shit, I have not thought for myself in so long. I have not felt my own feelings in so long. And it started to scare me. And as cheesy as it sounds, the bubble really popped when I went and saw The Notebook, because I was like, oh my God, does this exist? And I remember telling him, I remember telling my husband, which sounds so weird to say, because it sounds like another life. I never feel like I've had a husband, but I told him, I want what I saw in The Notebook. I want passion, and I want to feel wild, and I want to feel like I have a whole world ahead of me. And I don't like this routine. I don't like absorbing myself in school. I don't even like my major, and I want to change the world. I want to go do things, and travel. And he just basically said I was living in a fantasy world, and that basically romantic marriages didn't really exist. It's more of just like a partnership. And so I said, in the next 6 weeks, will you just do one romantic thing for me, or take me on one romantic date? And I gave it 8 weeks. He didn't do it. And I remember, and this isn't to shame him because he was a very good man and he would have never intentionally hurt me, but I remember his birthday came up and I took him to a hotel room that I covered in rose petals, and I had this super sexy lingerie on under my jacket, and I took it off and played this romantic Keith Urban song. And he was he got mad. He was and he wasn't mean to me intentionally, but he was like, I have homework. I can't do this. And he's like, did you even bring my school stuff? And I'm standing there in lingerie, in this room that I rented when at this time, I never had more than $20 to my name. And I was like, oh, I can go back and get your backpack. And he went back and got his backpack, and he didn't come back until long after I was asleep. So that was when I really realized how much I was missing out on. And so
You're stifling yourself.
I left the marriage, and he was a good man, and I loved his father and his aunt a lot. And I felt like I lost one of the first feelings of family that I had ever had. But thank God that I did, because I saw the whole world, and
where'd you go from there? Firstly, I want to ask you, if now that you've had so much time to have, hindsight and get some clarity on what did happen there and who he was as a person and all the things that went down at that time in your life, do you have any kind of clarification as far as where his mind was at and what he was dealing with in that moment?
I think he had some depression. I don't think he really knew who he was. We were young, and I remember meeting him to sign the divorce papers, and I was so sad for both of us, and I was so scared. And at the time, I was dating a man that was beating me black and blue because I ran into the arms of the exact opposite. This man didn't pay any attention to me, didn't even know if he wanted to be with me. And I ran into the arms of a man who was so obsessed with me that I couldn't go to the gym by myself. He would sit outside in the car. He had to know my every move. And he literally would put, bruises all over my face. And I remember going to meet my ex-husband to sign the divorce papers without being able to tell him the situation I was in, but just feeling oh God, I don't know if I made the right decision. This was so much safer.
Right.
But I knew I had hurt him, and he definitely wanted to sign the papers at this point. And I hurt him because I left, and he was ashamed, wouldn't even go around his family because he was so embarrassed of his divorce. And so I remember signing the papers and not showing any emotion. And he said, we only got into this because someone told us it was what God wanted. We didn't do anything wrong. And I think he was trying to make me feel better. And I said something along the lines of that as well. And he said, I said almost verbatim the same thing in different words. And he just said, that's one of the smartest things you've ever said. And when he said that again, I felt cheap and unworthy, because did you not listen to anything that ever came out of my mouth, or did I just not talk to you, or why is that the smartest thing? I don't know.
Just felt not seen and heard at all. Not
yeah,
understood.
but my biggest lesson there is because I ran straight from his arms. I mean, straight like a monkey holding on from one branch to another branch. I ran straight into another man's arms. I never allowed myself to grieve that divorce or grieve the loss of that family or grieve the fact that like that family that took me off the streets, I was exiled from that church. Like exiled. I was on the path of sin. Nobody was allowed to talk to me basically. And so I lost all of this, and I up and went to Austin with like barely anything. And
so you moved to Austin straight out of this divorce.
I wanted to go to LA. Something that also had really woken me up is I saw a DVD that said Invisible Children on it. And at the time, we used to listen to CDs, you know? And so I thought that it was like a metal band, and I popped it into the pastor's laptop. And it was this documentary about these child soldiers who were forced to fight in war in Uganda. And it blew my mind that this goes on in the world. And I thought, holy hell, there are children going through this, and we're here in San Antonio just trying to get people to pray with us. Like, there are much bigger things that need to be done. And I thought my life was hard. Look at like what's going on. And I remember telling the youth pastor, can I please set up a booth to help raise money for these kids? And he basically, it was like, no, like I wasn't allowed to do anything outside of the government at 12. And so I got really mad, and I just thought like, this is not Christianity. Like, God's work is taking care of these kids that need it. And so I got really involved in Invisible Children. And that's why I went to Austin. I went to Austin because that's where one of the guys was from. And he was doing like a coffee talk. And so I went to Austin, not really sure.
One of the guys of
Invisible Children.
Hosting Invisible Children. Okay.
And he kind of just his story of like, he just got on a plane and went to Uganda. And I just thought, I'm going to do that too. I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to go to Uganda, and I'm going to figure out how to help these kids. And so
maybe just give us a real quick rundown on what Invisible Children is, what the organization does.
So it's a nonprofit that does music and art therapy with ex-child soldiers and gets them in rehab, emotional, recovery, and gets them back in school and gets them to where they are able to be around their families again, because these children have been forced to literally kill people, fight in a war at like 10, 12 years old, and rape their sisters, like really god awful things. And I kind of absorbed myself in that in a way of like ignoring my own pain. And so I was absorbed in Invisible Children and in this man that was abusing me. And I never let myself feel the divorce or the loss of this life that I had. And that was my biggest lesson there, because a year later, after I ended up staying in a battered women's shelter for a weekend to get rid of that guy, and had to have a lot of girlfriends help. I finally got rid of him. And a year later, I remember washing my dishes, and I was washing a fork, and it just hit me like, oh, I used to eat with my ex-husband with this fork. It sounds so silly, but like, it just hit me that like, what just happened? Like, did I have a divorce?
Like,
did I just date an abusive man? Like, did I just leave San Antonio and lose what I thought was my forever? And I fell to the floor and sobbed. And I hadn't prayed since I left that place because I had a bad taste in my mouth. Right. And I fell on the floor and I sobbed, and I was in my pajamas, and I just got up and walked to the nearest church. And I kind of entered back into my faith journey there. But
and you're now
22, 23. And I am also saving to go to Uganda. So I go to Uganda that year, which changed my life forever. But my whole goal in Austin was I wanted to become an actress and build this platform to speak to young girls that had also been told that they were never going to become anything, that also were living on the streets, that also were being abused, and tell them that they can become something. Because I had become this actress that like had a good life, and now I can tell you that you can too. And I just, for some reason, that was what I thought of as a platform, was being famous. And so I was like 22 and just thinking like, I need to get famous so that I can have a platform and reach people that need to be told they can become something.
Right.
And then I can give all the money to Uganda. And so I was like double, it was like knock out two birds with one stone. And so I was in Austin, cheerleader on Friday Night Lights, saving money to move to LA. And I get the job with Bellator. And that was the first time that I could afford moving to LA. So that's when I ended up going to LA and pursued that for a couple of years. And then here we are.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. You pursued acting, and you were working for Bellator. So you had some steady income coming in.
Had already also reunited with my mother around 21. It was a week before my wedding, or like a couple weeks before my wedding, I reunited with my mom and became friends with her also. So she was back in my life.
So you're mending that relationship, and now you had a new job, moving to a new place again. And for those listening who don't know, Bellator MMA is the mixed martial arts organization. That's where Jade and I met as co-ring girls.
Yes.
And
Which
then
would have never have guessed.
I know. Okay, so there you are. And I know also at sometime around this point you go to Brazil to do some sort of workshop. And
yeah, I wasn't sure. So right before I got hired with Bellator, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life, and saving up for LA didn't seem to be working out. And so I signed up for a yoga teacher training in Brazil for 6 weeks, and it was mostly in like silence and meditation. And I just thought like, well, I guess I'll be a yoga teacher, and maybe like that's another way I can heal people. And I went, and I'm not a yoga teacher.
But so
I
you're
tried,
there.
and like half the room did one thing and half the room did the other thing. And I
Really?
didn't know what I said. So
You're like, let's work on communication instead. We have a blip here.
but luckily I got hired by Bellator like literally the week that I left to
Okay.
Brazil to do that. So still
Okay, so
certified.
when you're out there, tell me how that story out in Brazil ends up you meeting Tom Shadyac later and kind of circling into you having children. It's a whole thing. So
Yeah, this is actually a really current story for me right now because of Viva, which I'll explain. But yeah, so I'm in Brazil. I had just gone through a breakup of a really toxic relationship. And
is this the abusive guy?
no, luckily that was short-lived.
Okay, that was, yeah, you did
This
that.
was the guy that you met, the first toad that you
Okay,
met.
one of this.
Yeah, very toxic, very codependent, and going through that breakup, one of those relationships that you just keep going back to and you have no idea why, but it's because you're trying to heal those parts of you. So I'm in Brazil.
Codependency patterns. We're all working through those.
Yeah. And so I go to Brazil and I'm in silence and meditation with all of my thoughts and all of my feelings and all of this stuff that I've not ever worked on. I'm only like 24. And there's a bunch of stuff that needs to be healed that before, not to say that God doesn't heal us, but it was more of a Band-Aid because we can't just say, I'm healed, God, I believe in God, I'm a Christian, so I'm healed. None of my childhood trauma had been healed. None of it. I had maybe experienced forgiveness, but I still had a lot of pain. And so here I am in Brazil with all of my thoughts and all of my feelings and
in silence.
Yeah. In a place where I don't feel like I fit in at all because it was like people who, when you're like around people who are so enlightened that like, what's the word? You say it for me.
Well, they just woke, but they're still sleeping.
But are you?
Yeah.
Are you if you're treating me like I'm not okay?
Right.
And I remember just feeling like I didn't fit in there. And, all of my childhood stuff is coming up because I'm alone with my thoughts. And on Friday nights, we could watch documentaries and talk about them. And usually someone from the documentary would be there to speak to us about it. And we watched this movie, Happy, and it was about being